There's this really fascinating quote about the modern titan we know today as Deere and Company. It goes, an investment of $2.35 million didn't just save the company from extinction, it bought them the future. But honestly, what's truly incredible is that this massive, multi-million-dollar global agricultural giant actually traces its roots back to something far, far humbler. It all started with a desperate gamble. A piece of scrap metal, a broken saw blade to be exact, and a massive problem that was literally stopping a young nation right in its tracks.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a pretty amazing journey, detailing how a remarkably simple tool solved a seemingly impossible problem. We're going to explore exactly how a broken saw blade forged a corporate empire that absolutely dominates today, and crucially, how it triggered some massive, completely unforeseen global consequences. Let's dive in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the prairie soil problem, move into a polished steel solution, then look at forging a plow empire, followed by fueling westward expansion, and finally, the unforeseen environmental cost.
Section 1. The prairie soil problem.
Okay, to really grasp the impact of this invention, we need to set the scene. Think about America back in the 1830s. The powerful push of manifest destiny, that 19th century belief that U.S. expansion was justified and inevitable, was driving settlers westward into totally untamed territory. But these farmers moving west hit a massive roadblock. They brought all their standard tools that worked great back east, where the soil is generally sandy, light, and pretty easily turned by a traditional cast iron or wooden plow. But the Midwest prairie soil, that was a totally different beast. It was incredibly rich and fertile for sure, but it was incredibly dense, super sticky, and held together by thick mats of tallgrass roots that were sometimes several inches thick.
So I really want you to ask yourself, how do you cut through what is essentially a woven carpet of earth? Imagine the sheer, back-breaking frustration these early settlers faced. They're out there trying to pull a rough, cast-iron plow through this incredibly dense sod, and the sticky clay would just stubbornly cling to the blade. Farmers had to literally stop every few steps just to scrape the heavy mud off their plows by hand. It exhausted the farmers, it exhausted their strong teams of oxen, and it frequently just snapped the plows entirely. This stubborn soil was literally an existential threat to westward expansion.
Section 2. A polished steel solution.
Enter our protagonist. In 1836, a blacksmith named John Deere arrived in Illinois and immediately noticed the local farmers struggling against this prairie earth. Well, this led to a brilliant aha moment in 1837. Deere remembered how he used to polish steel needles in his father's tailor shop back in Vermont by running them through sand. He also thought about how highly polished steel pitchfork tines would just slide effortlessly through hay and soil. So, taking a broken saw blade, he carefully shaped it and attached it to a custom curved piece of iron called a mold board. By polishing the steel until it was perfectly smooth, he created the first commercially successful self-scouring steel plow. And because that steel was so highly polished, the sticky, damp prairie clay just slid cleanly right off that curved surface with every single pass.
Now, the crucial thing to understand here is that Deere wasn't just an inventor. The guy was a master craftsman, completely obsessed with quality. As he famously put it, I will never put my name on a product that does not have in it the best that is in me. When local farmers tested out his prototype, they found that what used to take days of back-breaking, stop-and-go labor could suddenly be done in mere hours. Naturally, word of this miraculous self-scouring plow spread like wildfire, and Deere gained rapid local fame.
Section 3. Forging a plow empire.
Having a brilliant tool is one thing, right? But transforming it into an empire? That requires serious business savvy. Digging into the historical records uncovers what you might actually call the Plow Wars. Believe it or not, John Deere actually wasn't the very first person to make a steel plow out of a saw blade. Another blacksmith named John Lane beat him to it in 1833. But Lane never patented his device. Deere also shared early credit with a partner named Leonard Andrus. However, Deere was the astute businessman of the bunch. He secured patent number 46,454, relentlessly refined the manufacturing process, and firmly cemented his name as the sole creator of the first commercially successful model. And Deere scaled this vision incredibly fast. He built that first plow in 1837. By 1841, he's already making up to 100 plows a year. But 1848, that was the massive turning point. Deere dissolved his partnership with Andrus and moved his entire operation to Moline, Illinois. Why Moline? Because it was a bustling transportation hub right on the Mississippi River. This strategic move meant he could ship his plows far and wide, laying the vital groundwork for the eventual 1868 incorporation of Deere and Company. Now, take a wild guess how much this piece of world-changing technology cost back then. Just $10. That's roughly the equivalent of around $320 today. This pricing strategy was absolutely brilliant. It meant the plow wasn't just some luxury item for wealthy landowners, it was highly accessible to everyday homesteaders who were just trying to carve out a living on the frontier.
Section 4. Fueling Westward Expansion.
Let's zoom out for a second to look at the macro-historical ripples. This wasn't just a handy agricultural tool, it was a literal engine for American nation-building. To really understand the scale here, by 1856, John Deere's factory was producing and selling over 13,000 plows every single year. As thousands of families streamed westward after the Civil War into places like Oklahoma and Texas, they were carrying Deere plows right along with them in their wagons and on trains.
It rightfully earned the dramatic nickname, the plow that broke the plains. You see, before this invention, the tough sod severely limited settlement. But with the steel plow, millions of acres of incredibly fertile land were suddenly unlocked. Whole towns sprang up around this new farmland. Railroads expanded specifically to carry the newly grown grain and cotton. It took struggling subsistence farmers and turned them into massive surplus producers. It effectively pushed the United States toward becoming the global agricultural superpower that it is today.
Section 5. The unforeseen environmental cost.
Now, as with all massive technological shifts, there is a darker side to the story. The hidden cost of literally breaking the plains. The very efficiency of the steel plow led to some devastating, cascading ecological consequences. For centuries, those tall-grass prairie ecosystems had been held tightly together by that stubborn, deep-rooted native vegetation we talked about earlier. When farmers easily plowed under millions of acres to plant monoculture crops like wheat and corn, all that natural cover was completely destroyed. This led to the extinction of local animal species. But even worse, without those natural root networks holding the earth down, severe soil erosion began. This 1830s technological triumph laid the direct groundwork for a massive environmental disaster a century later, the devastating dust storms of the 1930s, famously known as the Dust Bowl.
But despite this incredibly complex legacy, the company born from a discarded saw blade just continues to leap forward. Deere Company remains a multi-million-dollar global enterprise in the 2020s. Its iconic green and yellow leaping deer logo, which has actually been in use for over 155 years, is globally synonymous with farming and agricultural progress today.
I want to leave you with this final thought. The story of the steel plow is proof that every single major invention carries both incredible promise and heavy responsibility. It completely transformed a nation, but it also permanently altered a landscape. So think about it. What are the steel plows of today? What modern tools are breaking our current frontiers, whether we're talking about AI, biotechnology, or space exploration? And what unforeseen consequences might they bring down the line? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I will see you next time.